All right, today we may get to ego, but we're going to start off talking about ego, mind, observer, witness, self, thoughts, who you are, all that kind of stuff.
Avatar.
Body, corpse, like all the different terms you might hear when you're listening to any kind of a spiritual talker, including us. You'll hear all these different terms that are, some of them are the same thing, some of them are not the same thing, but when you don't know what any of them are, it's totally confusing. When I first started, you hear ego and you're like, oh, Freud talked about id ego and superego. Those are all like things. And that actually does relate to this, but at the same time, it doesn't.
At all.
Completely not at all. But sometimes it does, but sometimes, most of the time it doesn't. So I wanted to start off with a generalized, just a really short description of what each one is before we talk about ego, which could take the rest of our lives. But when we say ego or mind or kind of project this, that yourself into a third person, it is this thought process, this programming. It's your somebody training, your programming.
Even personality can be
all
ego.
different words for the same thing, and personality completely. It's everything that's running that you're not in control of, but you think you are.
No.
So when you're meditating and you're feeling these thoughts coming, those thoughts coming are not you.
That's the mind.
The observer is the one seeing the thoughts.
It's
and
you.
sometimes getting involved with them.
And that's why you cannot control your thoughts.
Exactly, because you're not the one actually having those automatic, like pre-programmed thoughts that are coming up.
So who was creating the thoughts?
And we call that ego.
Yay.
Or mind.
Or brain.
Or brain.
The brain is always thinking.
Yeah, or even self.
The self.
Yeah, or the
which
I.
is also
the I.
Which is
There's
also
so many words for it.
a composed bunch of thoughts. That's the ego. That's the false identity of who you are.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they first get into this, are like, what do you mean? Like, thoughts are me, right?
No, you're not the thoughts.
They're not. You are not the thoughts.
Because if you were to lose your mind, or lose your memory, I should say, it would delete everything who you thought you were, and you start from zero. So basically, all your life experiences have made the person that you are and have created the personality that you have. But that is not you. That's a lame excuse to be how you are, and that's ego.
Who you think you are, and I'll pretend you are who you think you are. If you pretend I am who I think I am, is what Ram Dass said, basically saying the same thing. And when you get into meditation, when your mind is silent, you'll start to notice that silence is not, it's not you making yourself silent. It's that constant thought process that isn't necessarily intentional, that we are kind of considering separate from us. That's what is getting silenced.
Which we need to talk about. We often do not believe that there is a separation between thoughts and ourselves. We always think, I am thinking this, but you do not process these thoughts. These thoughts come and you take ownership. And who is the one taking ownership of those thoughts?
That's the real deeper self.
The real self, not as self as the false self, but
the
more
observer,
your
the witness,
observer,
the person that's watching.
the awareness.
That's the
your
real
awareness.
you, instead of the programming that's coming up constantly. And those thoughts that come up on their own automatically are not you. They're your mind, your ego, your blah, 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 like all these other words for the same thing that are happening. And you're not the one making them happen, even though you think it's you. But you won't necessarily understand that until you've been meditating long enough to notice that, hey, I didn't just ask for that thought to come up, but it did.
It just came, yes.
And who did that come from? Because I'm watching it happening.
And people might say, well, that's normal. Thoughts always come like that. But it's like, you have to understand the deeper...
But we're trying to...
The deeper understanding where the thoughts come from.
The meaning of it, yeah, exactly. That those thoughts are not you.
So let's just to be clear, the mind is always thinking.
Yes, it's always active and thinking, because that's... Your whole life you've been trained to do that, and that's normal.
The self is always thinking.
Yeah.
The ego is always thinking. And the ego thinks.
Yeah, and I think it really gets confusing because there's all the same thing being said by everybody, but just with different names or words for the same things.
It's a different terminology, but it's kind of like the same, but it's not.
Yeah, and so you'll read different books and you're like, what are they talking about? Or like, what is this observer and stuff? And who is that? There's like, am I supposed to have two voices in my head? And it's weird because before you get into it, once you get into the practice, you notice there are two voices.
Well, it's what I like about this.
but it's not multiple personalities.
If you had
just,
that's all
yeah,
can be possible. If you have
it's just the protective
this
mind,
thought,
ego going,
who is
and it's you
observing
watching
the
it.
thoughts?
Well, exactly. If the thought's coming up and someone's seeing it, then
Who is observing the thoughts?
we've got to label those somehow. So we use these terms: ego, mind versus witness, observer, awareness,
brain,
being here now. All of that. Attention span, even, is one of them, actually.
So should we say there is just? Can we just talk about the main awareness, and the ego / mind / brain is the one always producing these thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, so the real you is the one always receiving and listening to the voice in your head.
And you'll notice, like, a lot of people say, oh, like, running is my meditation, or doing some exercise or other things. And it's a meditation because those thoughts are gone. They're having those moments of silence where they're just being present and aware, where that ego is silent. And that is why it actually is a meditation.
Yeah.
To do that. And that's great. So yeah, if you can get to that point doing anything else, that's great too.
So in our next videos, we are really going to talk about what the ego
individually,
is,
what they are,
what the awareness is, how we understand ego, and how do we practice awareness or the real you.
Oh yeah, how do we stop getting caught in it? I think is a big.
Or being identified with
and
the
being identified
traits that you think you have.
Oh yeah, I know, and that'll bring up memories in the past and the future not existing and all that other stuff. I think that the observer, the witness, to me it's a very limited, there's not a lot to say about being that silent, the still silent voice, which is you just being watching. I don't know how much more of a definition I would need to give them that. Do you have anything else to say about the person that's like the observer watching the thoughts coming? At all? Because the ego, I could talk for years, and then that little silent observer, it's like, oh, well, it observes. That's pretty simple.
Well, once we understand the real you, you can't really identify the one that is not you, which is actually the mind or the ego. And the ego is not being you're egocentric. I mean, you are egocentric. Yes, you are egocentric. But the ego is more like this bunch of traits and labels that define you as who you are.
Well, it's all telling you what you have to be in the moment when it's not real.
You're nothing.
Exactly. So,
and by nothing means you are not a prejudged idea of what you're going to do based on this case or this scene. It's just
you're only what
different.
You want to be in the moment, and it's your choice what you want to be then. And ego, mind, thoughts tell you that you have to be all this other stuff, and that they identify you with everything else that comes in, and you're like, well, I couldn't do that, and it's like,
which is very interesting, because a lot of the times people say that I would never do that.
And I say, who would never do that? Ego would never do that.
But
you can do that.
There's a big limitation when you say I would never. You already limited yourself, and you would never do that.
And then that takes you to right action too, though, that you can't just do whatever you want. You still have to put some thought and compassion into your actions and everything you do. But at the same time, you don't have to feel so limited in like little things, the little social gestures or whatever that's happening around you. You don't have to feel helpless. Even though other people can do it, you can't, because your mind is like, I can't do that, but you can do that. And we hold ourselves back is kind of what I'm trying to tell you. I mean,
which reminds me of a question of who are you? I said, well, my name is, well, that you said it. Your name is. Well, I do this. Well, that's what you do. And you keep going on and on and on and on. And then until you get to the really point is, who are you? You're nothing.
Yeah,
you're the awareness behind all the adjectives that you threw to people, like your name or what you do.
Oh yeah, you're not your past. You're not any of those identifications at all. Those are all programming, but at the same time, you need to know and have those identifications to interact in society. So you'll basically start to see those as roles, though. So you're like, oh, well, I'm playing that role of 31-year-old male with glasses who is coughing for some reason. And you'll start to play that role of like,
that's coronavirus right
there. I know. You'll start playing those roles. But you won't be that role anymore. Like I can go in and be a server or waiter without being the server or waiter. Like, so there's someone there observing, but I'm just here the whole time watching it happen. And I'm not arguing with anyone like, well, I'm not a server. It's like, no, I'm playing the role of server, and there I am doing it. And there's no involvement or attachment involved with it.
There's no
So we're
ego.
going to make another video to go deeper into ego, how it works and why, and everything else like that. But this was supposed to just be the introduction for, you've probably heard all kinds of terms for all
Ego.
kinds of different parts of the mind and how it works. And I hope this helps to clear up some of that confusion.
Yeah.
Namaste.